I would rather have no mate than make a poor Omega my Luna. Mason Carter's words struck the Moonstone courtyard harder than Hannah Miller had imagined rejection ever could. Beneath hundreds of silver lanterns, nearly 300 wolves of the Silver Pine Pack watched the ceremonial flame burn bright blue between them, confirming what neither could deny. They were mates. For one impossible heartbeat, Hannah had believed the moon had finally given her something no one could take away. Then Mason looked at her faded navy dress, the sleeve she had repaired herself, the simple shoes she had polished that morning, and shame, not love, crossed his face. There has to be a mistake. Elder Warren shook his gray head. The Moonstone does not make mistakes. Whispers spread through the courtyard. Hannah recognized the voices. Families whose kitchens she had cleaned. Mothers whose sick children she had watched through winter nights. People who accepted her kindness easily but had never considered her their equal. She doesn't even have a family name worth mentioning. Imagine her beside the future Alpha. Mason straightened his ceremonial jacket. My Luna will represent Silver Pine before every major pack in the north. She needs education, connections, standing. His eyes returned to Hannah. You have none of those things. The new bond inside Hannah reached instinctively toward him even while he explained why she was beneath him. That hurt more than the laughter. Elder Warren stepped forward. Mason, think carefully. A recognized bond is sacred. Mason glanced toward Olivia Grant, the Beta's elegant daughter standing in silver near the front row. Then he made his choice. I reject Hannah Miller as my mate. The blue flame died. Pain tore through Hannah's chest. Her fingers locked around the Moonstone table until the dizziness passed. Nobody stepped forward. Mason waited, perhaps expecting tears, perhaps pleading. Hannah had spent 22 years learning how easily poor people could be made to feel grateful for crumbs. She would not beg for love from a man ashamed to receive hers. Hannah, Elder Warren said gently, pack law requires your answer. She lifted her head. I accept. Silence replaced the whispers. Hannah removed the small Carter crest attendants had pinned to her dress and laid it beside the extinguished flame. And at sunrise I'm leaving Silver Pine. Mason blinked. Where would you go? She looked beyond the gates toward the dark forest road. She had $43 hidden beneath a loose floorboard, one suitcase, no family, no promised job, and nowhere certain to sleep tomorrow night. For the first time, the reality frightened her enough that she nearly looked away. I don't know. Mason's mouth curved faintly, as though uncertainty proved his point. Hannah swallowed. But somewhere I don't have to apologize for being poor. She turned from him before courage could abandon her. Then headlights appeared beyond the gates. One vehicle, then another, then a third, black and moving in perfect formation through the trees. A silver wolf crest gleamed on the first hood. Conversations died instantly. Alpha Richard Carter rose so quickly his chair scraped stone. Mason's face lost its color. Even Elder Warren straightened. Hannah knew the royal crest. Every wolf in the north did. The first vehicle stopped beneath the Moonstone lanterns. Its rear door opened. A tall man in a black royal coat stepped into the cold night, and hundreds of wolves bowed their heads. Alpha King Caleb Blackwood had arrived without warning on the very night Silver Pine had publicly rejected its poorest Omega. Hannah lowered her eyes with everyone else. She thought the worst moment of her life had already happened. She had no idea the king had come to investigate the very system that had kept her powerless, or that before the night ended, he would have a reason far more personal to remember her name. The courtyard changed the moment Caleb Blackwood crossed its gates. Wolves who had laughed minutes earlier lowered their eyes. Servants straightened tablecloths. Mason adjusted his ceremonial jacket. Alpha Richard hurried forward with a smile that did not reach his eyes. Your Majesty, Silver Pine welcomes you. We weren't informed of a royal visit. Caleb's gaze moved across the courtyard, lingering briefly on the extinguished Moonstone. Flame. You weren't supposed to be. Richard's smile disappeared. Caleb stopped beside Elder Warren. At 35, he had ruled the Northern Territories long enough to earn a reputation that made even powerful alphas cautious. He rarely raised his voice because he rarely needed to. My council received complaints concerning Silver Pine, he said. Housing restrictions, employment practices, unequal treatment of lower-ranked wolves. Several Omegas near the service tables looked at the ground. Richard cleared his throat. Our people are treated according to tradition. Tradition and fairness are not always the same thing. Mason stepped forward. If tonight's ceremony gave your majesty an unfortunate impression, what happened was a private matter. Caleb looked toward the dead flame. Someone was rejected? Mason hesitated. Yes. Who? Mason pointed toward Hannah. Caleb turned. Their eyes met. Hannah expected pity. Instead, a strange warmth moved through the place where Mason's broken bond still ached. Caleb went utterly still. Something inside his wolf had awakened, but years of political deception had taught him not to trust instinct without evidence. A complaint had brought him here. A rejected Omega stood at the center of the ceremony. The timing was almost too convenient. Before he could question her, glass struck stone behind Hannah. Emma, a young Omega servant, had stumbled while clearing a tray. Goblets rolled beneath the tables. I'm sorry, Emma whispered, dropping to her knees. Guests stepped around her as if she were part of the furniture. Hannah looked toward the gates. She could have left. Instead she knelt. Slow down. Nothing's broken. Emma's hands trembled. Hannah gathered the glasses one by one. Mason's voice cut across the courtyard. Hannah, get up. The king is here. She looked over her shoulder. I noticed. Caleb watched closely. No one had asked Hannah to help. No powerful eyes had been on her when she moved. She simply saw someone humiliated and refused to leave her alone. Thank you, Emma whispered. You don't have to thank me. Hannah steadied the tray and helped her stand. Caleb's suspicion weakened. The scent reached him. Again, rain and wildflowers, and his wolf pressed against his control. He approached. Miss Miller. Hannah stiffened. Your Majesty. Why did you help her? Confusion crossed her face. Because she needed help. You were dealing with something difficult yourself. Hannah glanced at the extinguished flame. Being hurt doesn't give me permission to stop being kind. Caleb said nothing. Mason did. Hannah has always been sentimental. She means well, but a future Luna requires more than kindness. Caleb turned toward him. You consider kindness a weakness? Leadership requires strength. What kind? Authority. Confidence. The ability to make difficult choices. Caleb looked back at Hannah. And you, Miss Miller? What is strength? She wanted no part of this attention, yet Emma still stood beside her clutching the tray. Hannah answered carefully. Maybe strength is having power and not using it to make someone smaller. The courtyard went silent. Caleb's suspicion did not disappear completely, but something more dangerous replaced it. Respect. Beneath his calm expression, his wolf recognized her with growing certainty. Hannah, however, saw only the king studying her as though he had discovered a question he had not expected to ask. Caleb did not announce what his wolf was telling him. Instead, he asked his chief investigator, Adrian Cole, to bring him the first Silver Pine complaint. A leather folder appeared in his hand. Hannah's stomach tightened when Caleb opened it. Do you know anything about these allegations, Miss Miller? Mason immediately turned toward her. Why would she? Caleb ignored him. Hannah looked at the folder. I know Omegas lose better housing when higher-ranked families request it. I know some jobs are closed to us. Did you file the complaint? No. Do you know who did? No. Caleb studied her face. Would you tell me if you did? Hannah hesitated. The courtyard seemed to hold its breath. If someone trusted me with their name, I wouldn't betray them just because a king asked. Richard inhaled sharply. Mason looked horrified. Caleb's expression remained unreadable. Even if refusing angered me? Hannah's heartbeat accelerated. Especially then. They would have trusted me because they were afraid. Something shifted in Caleb. This woman was either extraordinarily skilled at deception or incapable of performing the obedience powerful men expected. He suspected the latter. Fair answer. Mason stepped between them. Your Majesty, Hannah is upset. She shouldn't be questioned tonight. Hannah looked at him. Why are you speaking for me? Because you're emotional. I accepted your rejection. I'm leaving peacefully. You're the one who keeps explaining me to everyone. Several lower-ranked wolves lifted their heads. Mason's face reddened. You remain a Silver Pine Omega until sunrise. Then you only have a few more hours to be disappointed in me. Caleb almost smiled. Hannah noticed, and the strange warmth beneath her ribs returned. She stepped away, unsettled by it. Caleb felt the answering pull. He could end every whisper with one sentence. He could tell Silver Pine that the woman Mason had rejected might be the Alpha King's mate. But then every bowed head, every apology, every sudden kindness shown to Hannah afterward would be contaminated by his crown. He wanted to know who she was when she believed nothing powerful was waiting to reward her. Hannah returned to her cottage before midnight. The room seemed smaller than she remembered. One narrow bed, one cracked wash basin, 2 dresses, a coat with a repaired pocket. She pulled up the loose floorboard and counted her savings twice. $43. On the second count, her hands began shaking. Courage had been easier beneath 300 watching eyes. Here alone fear could finally speak. What if Mason was right? What if she lasted 3 days? What if no pack hired an unattached Omega? What if leaving with dignity only meant failing somewhere no one knew her name? Hannah sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the coins and folded bills. For one terrible minute she imagined returning to the courtyard, apologizing, telling Alpha Richard she had overreacted. Safety waited on the other side of humiliation. All she had to do was become smaller again. Hannah covered her face. Then her gaze fell on the old sewing box beside the bed. Inside were small notes she had saved over the years. Thank you for watching my son when I was ill. Thank you for bringing soup. Thank you for speaking to the steward when they cut my hours. One note was written in a child's uneven handwriting. Thank you for making Mama smile again. Hannah read them slowly. She was afraid. More afraid than she had allowed anyone in the courtyard to see. But fear did not make Mason right, and poverty did not make her worthless. She folded the notes carefully and packed them beneath her clothes. Then she placed the $43 in her coat pocket and closed the suitcase. A few minutes later, she carried her residence key to the pack administration office and signed the formal departure register. The night clerk stared at her name. You're surrendering your cottage? At sunrise. You understand that once this is processed, the pack isn't required to give it back? Hannah looked down at the key resting in her palm. It represented the only home she had. Her fingers trembled once before she placed it on the desk. I understand. Less than 10 minutes later, Adrian Cole returned to Caleb carrying the departure register. She filed it, he said quietly. Surrendered her residence. Effective at sunrise. Caleb looked toward the dark path leading to Hannah's cottage. He had wondered whether her declaration had been anger speaking, whether she expected Mason to stop her, whether the entire scene had somehow been designed to draw royal attention. The signed register answered all 3 questions. Hannah Miller was actually leaving. No bargaining. No demand for compensation. No attempt to reach the king. She was prepared to walk beyond Silver Pine with $43 and no guarantee anyone would be waiting on the other side. Caleb closed the folder. His suspicion finally died. What remained was far more dangerous. His wolf had recognized Hannah before his mind trusted her. Now Caleb was beginning to understand why. And when Hannah returned to surrender the last thing Silver Pine still held over her, Mason would discover that the poor Omega he had discarded was no longer willing to trade her dignity for safety. Hannah returned to the courtyard carrying her suitcase, intending to leave Silver Pine the moment her departure became official at sunrise. Mason intercepted her beneath the last row of lanterns. His eyes dropped to the case. You're actually leaving. I said I was. Put that down. Hannah tightened her grip. No. Mason glanced toward the royal delegation. My father is already dealing with an investigation. If you walk out immediately after being rejected, everyone will assume Silver Pine mistreats Omegas. Hannah stared at him. So you don't need me to stay because you're worried about me. You need me to stay because you're worried about how this looks. Don't twist my words. I'm repeating them. Mason lowered his voice. Go to my father. Tell him you understand why the rejection was necessary. Then tell King Caleb you've always been treated fairly. Hannah's fear from the cottage returned. Mason knew exactly where to press. Your cottage belongs to Silver Pine. Your work belongs to Silver Pine. You have no family and almost no money. Walk away now and you lose everything. Hannah thought of the residence key already surrendered at the administration office. There was no cottage to retreat to now. She could feel the $43 inside her pocket. For one heartbeat, the road beyond the gates looked enormous. Then I'll start with $43. Mason stared at her. You won't last a week. Her eyes burned. This time she did not pretend otherwise. I'm terrified you might be right. His expression softened, mistaking honesty for surrender. Hannah continued. But being afraid doesn't mean I have to stay. She lifted the suitcase. If I fail, at least the failure will belong to me. Mason reached for her arm. He never touched her. Leave her. Caleb's voice stopped him. The Alpha King approached with Adrian and 2 council members behind him. Your Majesty, this is an internal pack matter. It ceased being internal when you asked a vulnerable Omega to give false testimony during a royal investigation. Richard hurried forward. I'm sure Mason merely expressed himself poorly. Caleb looked at Hannah. Did he ask you to tell me Silver Pine treated you fairly? Hannah could have protected Mason. She had done that kind of thing all her life, softening other people's cruelty to avoid causing trouble. Her fingers tightened around the suitcase. Yes. Caleb turned to Richard. Then add attempted witness coercion to tomorrow's review. The courtyard erupted in whispers. Mason's face hardened. She isn't a witness. She's angry because I rejected her. Then why are you afraid of what she'll say? Caleb asked. Mason had no answer. A gust moved through the courtyard. Caleb's control slipped for half a second. Cedar and winter rain spread through the air, carrying the unmistakable edge of royal mate scent. Elder Warren lifted his head. Richard froze. Mason inhaled, and all the blood left his face. His eyes moved from Caleb to Hannah. Hannah did not understand what had changed, only that Mason suddenly looked at her differently. Caleb saw it immediately. So did Adrian. The very thing Caleb had tried to prevent had begun. Hannah's perceived value was changing because of him. Mason stepped toward her, his voice abruptly gentle. Hannah, perhaps we should talk. She frowned. Minutes ago he had threatened her future. Now he sounded afraid to lose her. Caleb said nothing. Hannah deserved to discover the reason for that change herself. Mason looked at her suitcase, then at Caleb, and made the mistake that would finally reveal exactly what his regret was worth. Maybe, he said carefully, I rejected you too quickly. Olivia Grant's face changed before Hannah's did. Mason. He barely looked at her. His attention remained fixed on Hannah and the royal scent lingering in the courtyard. Pack law allows a rejected bond to be reconsidered before sunrise if both wolves consent. Hannah stared at him. Only an hour earlier, he had announced that her poverty made her unfit to become Luna. Now his voice carried almost desperate tenderness. You want to withdraw the rejection? I made the decision under pressure. You seemed very certain. People reconsider. Alpha Richard stepped closer. Hannah, Silver Pine can make arrangements. A larger cottage, formal education, Luna training, a stipend while you prepare. Every offer landed like another insult because Hannah understood what none of them were willing to say. Nothing about her had changed, only the way powerful people were looking at her. Mason reached for the future she had once dreamed of. We can restore the bond. You can become Luna. Hannah's eyes filled, not because she wanted the offer, but because a younger version of herself would have given anything to hear it. She asked one question. If the Alpha King had never looked at me tonight, would you be offering me any of this? Mason opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Olivia looked away. Hannah nodded slowly. That's what I thought. Hannah, it isn't that simple. It is now. I underestimated you. No. You're estimating me differently because someone more powerful might value me. Mason's composure cracked. I withdraw my rejection. Elder Warren immediately raised a hand. Withdrawal requires Hannah's consent. Hundreds of eyes turned toward her. Hannah felt the old ache of the bond, the fear of tomorrow, the weight of $43 in her pocket. She also remembered Mason's face when he believed she had nothing anyone important could want. I do not consent. Mason went still. The words seemed to release something inside Hannah that the original rejection had trapped. Caleb's wolf surged with such force that he had to lock his hands behind his back. She had chosen dignity without knowing what his attention might mean. The wind shifted. This time Hannah caught the scent herself. Warmth rushed through her chest. Beneath the skin of her left wrist, a thin silver crescent appeared. Gasps swept through the courtyard. "What is that?" Hannah whispered. Elder Warren stared at her wrist. An old bond mark. Mason's eyes widened. Caleb knew concealment would soon become impossible. Before anyone could explain further, Emma stepped out from the service tables. "Your Majesty." Her voice shook. Richard turned sharply. "Emma, return to your duties." Caleb's gaze hardened. "Let her speak." Emma clutched her apron. "You asked who complained about Silver Pine." Hannah looked at her. Emma swallowed. "There wasn't one complaint. There were 14. Adrian's expression sharpened. Emma continued. "We were afraid to send names. Hannah didn't write them. She didn't even know we sent them." Richard exhaled with relief too soon. Emma looked at Hannah, tears gathering. "But most of us survived long enough to send them because of her." The courtyard fell silent. When Mara lost her kitchen job, Hannah shared her wages. When my mother was moved out of family housing, Hannah argued with the steward until they gave her another room. When Nora's child was sick, Hannah worked both their shifts so Nora wouldn't be dismissed. Hannah shook her head. "Emma, you don't have to." "Yes, I do." Emma looked toward the wolves who had mocked Hannah earlier. "Everyone calls her weak because she's poor. Half the Omegas standing here have eaten because she went without." Caleb's gaze returned to Hannah. The moon had given him a sign. Emma had just given him something more important, proof. The royal investigators opened the Silver Pine records before dawn. What began as 14 anonymous complaints became a pattern no polished ceremony could hide. Omega wages had been reduced without hearings. Better cottages were reassigned whenever ranked families wanted them. Workers who questioned stewards suddenly found their shifts disappearing. Caleb stood at a long courtyard table while Adrian placed document after document before Alpha Richard. Hannah remained near Emma, wishing she could disappear from the attention now surrounding her. "These signatures," Caleb said, "authorize the housing transfers." Richard's jaw tightened. "Administrative decisions." "And these?" Adrian placed another ledger beside them. "Wage deductions applied almost exclusively to Omegas." No answer came. Then Adrian opened a worn notebook found in the service office. Beside dozens of names were small handwritten annotations. Shift covered by H. Miller. Food delivered. Rent shortage paid. Appeal to steward. Caleb looked at Hannah. "You did all of this?" Her cheeks warmed. "Not all of it." Emma almost laughed through her tears. "Most of it." "Why keep no record yourself?" Caleb asked. "Because helping someone isn't alone." The answer struck him harder than any prophecy could have. Caleb had spent years surrounded by nobles who catalogued every favor so it could someday be collected. Hannah had almost nothing and still gave without keeping score. Mason stood beyond the table, silent now. For the first time, he was seeing the life of the woman he had judged by her dress. Hannah noticed his expression but felt no satisfaction. She did not want to become valuable because powerful men had finally assembled evidence of her goodness. She wanted the Omegas beside her to stop needing secret kindness simply to survive. "Your Majesty," she said, "if this investigation changes anything, don't change it for me." Caleb studied her. "What would you change?" Hannah looked toward Emma. "Make it so the next woman doesn't need someone like me to beg a steward for her home." Caleb's wolf went utterly still. Not submission. Recognition. The silver crescent on Hannah's wrist brightened. A matching heat burned beneath Caleb's cuff. He could no longer hide it. Hannah saw the silver light through the fabric. Her eyes locked on his wrist. "You have one too." The courtyard fell silent. Caleb slowly pulled back his cuff. An identical crescent glowed against his skin. Mason whispered a curse. Elder Warren's face went pale. Hannah stared between the marks. "What does it mean?" Caleb could have answered with a title. Queen. Royal Luna. Maid of the Alpha King. Instead he stepped away from the table, creating space between them. "It means the moon recognizes something between us." Hannah's breath caught. A mate bond. Yes. Whispers exploded around them. Several wolves immediately bowed. Hannah saw it happen and recoiled. Yesterday they had barely looked at her. Now they bent their knees because a mark connected her to a king. Caleb's expression hardened. Stand. The wolves obeyed. No one bows to Miss Miller because of me. Hannah looked at him sharply. Caleb understood exactly what had frightened her. Recognition is not ownership, he said. This mark tells us what may exist. It does not decide what you owe me. Mason stepped forward. She can't possibly make a free choice now. You're the Alpha King. Caleb looked at him. For once we agree. He removed his black royal cloak and handed it to Adrian. Then he pulled the silver signet ring from his finger and placed it on top. The courtyard watched in stunned silence. Caleb faced Hannah without the visible symbols of his crown. Then for the next question, forget the king. Hannah's pulse raced. Caleb had finally revealed destiny. Now, instead of claiming her, he was preparing to risk losing her. Caleb stood before Hannah without his royal cloak or signet ring. He could not remove his power, his history, or the fact that hundreds of wolves knew his name, but he could refuse to use those things against her. At sunrise, he said, a vehicle will be waiting outside these gates. Hannah glanced toward the paling horizon. For where? Anywhere you choose. The palace. Only if you ask. His answer silenced the courtyard. Another pack. A town outside wolf territory. The mountains. Somewhere you've never been. My council can give you a list of jobs open to any qualified applicant. The driver will take you wherever you decide. And you will owe me nothing. Hannah looked at their matching crescents. And if I never see you again? Something painful moved behind Caleb's eyes. His wolf hated the possibility, but his voice remained steady. Then I will still be glad you were free when you made that choice. For the first time since Mason rejected her, Hannah could not immediately answer. Mason had offered a cottage, rank, training, and the future she had once dreamed of. But only after another man's attention made her valuable. Caleb, who possessed more power than anyone in the courtyard, was offering her the one thing Mason never had. A door she could walk through without punishment. Mason stepped forward. Hannah, don't romanticize this. You barely know him. She turned toward him. You're right. Mason seemed startled by the agreement. Then stay. No. Why not? Hannah looked at the man she had once hoped destiny would choose for her. Because this isn't about choosing Caleb instead of you. Then what is it about? Her fingers closed around the $43 in her coat pocket. Finding out who I am when neither of you is choosing for me. Mason's face fell. Caleb's expression softened. Good, he said. Hannah blinked. Good. That's the first choice that matters. Mason gave a bitter laugh. You expect us to believe the Alpha King doesn't care whether his mate walks away? Caleb looked at him. Of course I care. Then his eyes returned to Hannah. Wanting someone is not permission to control them. The simplicity of the words hurt more than any grand declaration could have. Hannah's eyes filled. Caleb did not move closer. He stepped back. Go home. Finish packing. At sunrise, decide where the car goes. Hannah glanced at the glowing crescent on her wrist. And the bond. It will still be here tomorrow. What if I need answers? Ask me. What if I need time? Take it. What if I decide this bond isn't enough? Caleb held her gaze. Then the moon will have given me a mate, but not your consent. Those are not the same thing. Even Elder Warren looked startled. Hannah searched Caleb's face for the condition hidden beneath the kindness. There wasn't one. Caleb turned away first. He did not retrieve his ring. He did not put the royal cloak back on. Adrian, continue the review. The investigators returned to the ledgers. Emma began answering questions about the housing transfers. Caleb listened to her instead of watching Hannah to see whether his words had impressed her. That mattered more than Hannah wanted it to. She carried her suitcase toward the cottage, then paused once at the edge of the courtyard. Mason was staring at the dead ceremonial flame where he had rejected her. Caleb was bent over a table filled with records, listening while an Omega servant spoke. Two powerful men. Two completely different ideas of what power allowed them to do. Hannah walked on. At the cottage, she sat beside her packed suitcase while the night slowly thinned toward morning. Fear remained. So did the strange warmth of Caleb's bond. She imagined three futures. Staying in Silver Pine because it was familiar. Leaving alone because she needed to prove she could. Going somewhere with Caleb because she genuinely wanted to know the man beneath the crown. For hours she could not tell which choice belonged to courage and which belonged to fear. Then she understood the question itself was wrong. Freedom was not proving she needed no one. Freedom was being able to say yes without being afraid to say no. Hannah touched the $43 in her pocket. Yesterday, that money had represented everything standing between her and helplessness. Tonight it reminded her that she had been prepared to walk away before any king offered to catch her. Whatever she chose next would not erase that. The first ray of sunrise crossed the cottage floor. Hannah stood, lifted her suitcase, and took one final look at the room that had taught her how little a person could possess and still refused to surrender her dignity. Then she opened the door and walked toward the gates. The royal vehicle was waiting exactly as Caleb had promised. So was Caleb. He stood several yards from the open door beneath the fading Moonstone lanterns, leaving the road between them clear. His royal cloak rested over one arm, but the signet ring remained absent from his hand. No guards blocked Hannah's path. Yet word had spread, and much of Silver Pine had gathered in silence. Emma stood near the gates. Mason waited beside the Moonstone. Hannah stopped with her suitcase. Caleb did not approach. "Good morning," he said. Hannah almost smiled. "Good morning." He nodded toward the vehicle. "The driver follows your destination, not mine." Hannah looked toward the open road. "And if I want answers first? Ask. What does the bond mean?" Caleb's expression grew serious. "The crescent is an ancient royal mate mark. It means the moon recognizes a bond between us. Does that make me your Luna? No. The bond may recognize a mate. Becoming Luna is a life you would have to choose. And if I never choose it? Then you never become Luna." A murmur moved through the pack. Caleb ignored it. Mason stepped forward. "Hannah." She turned. His arrogance was gone. "I'm sorry for rejecting you." Hannah shook her head gently. "That's not the part one hope you learn from." Mason frowned. "You looked at my dress, my cottage, my education, my rank, everything I didn't have, and decided that told you who I was." His eyes lowered. "I was wrong. Then don't make the same mistake with the next person who has less than you." Mason gave no excuse. "I won't." Hannah realized she no longer needed his regret. Whether he became a better man was no longer her responsibility. She turned back to Caleb. "Yesterday I thought leaving meant losing everything. And now, staying because I'm afraid would cost more." Caleb nodded. Hannah tightened her grip on the suitcase. "But I'm not leaving Silver Pine to become your Luna." "Good." She raised an eyebrow. "You keep saying that. Because when you finally say yes to something, I want to know it's yours." Her throat tightened. "I'm not ready for a title." "Then don't take one." "I don't know if what I feel for you is mine or the bond." "Then we'll find out." "That could take time." "I have time." Behind them, the Moonstone began to shimmer. A thin silver light moved through the ancient stone. Hannah looked at the vehicle, the open road, then Caleb standing far enough away that she could leave without passing through his arms. Suddenly she understood. Freedom did not mean walking alone. It meant being able to say yes because she was equally free to say no. Caleb slowly extended his hand, palm upward. He did not cross the distance. "If you take it, we leave these gates together. Tomorrow you decide what comes after." Hannah looked at his hand. "And if I don't?" "The car still takes you wherever you want." Her eyes filled. "No one chooses for me." Caleb's voice softened. "Not Mason. Not Silver Pine. Not the moon. And not me." Hannah looked at Emma, who smiled through tears. Then she looked at the cottages where she had spent years believing survival was the most she could ask from life. Finally, she looked at the Alpha King who could have claimed destiny, but had instead given her the freedom to refuse him. Hannah set down her suitcase. "Then I'm choosing myself first." Caleb's hand remained open. "You should." She stepped toward him. The Moonstone brightened. And after that, she stopped just beyond his reach. I'm choosing to see where this goes. Hannah placed her hand in his. Silver light exploded from the Moonstone, racing through the ancient stone like lightning beneath ice. They're matching. Crescents blazed. Wolves gasped. Elder Warren's ceremonial staff struck the ground. The royal bond, he whispered. The last phantom ache from Mason's rejection vanished from Hannah's chest. Caleb's fingers closed gently around hers. No pulling. No clamming. Only an answer. Hannah looked up at him. You knew this might happen. I hoped. But you didn't know I'd take your hand. Caleb's eyes warmed. That was the point. Hannah smiled at him without fear or obligation. Silver Pine stood bathed in moonstone light. She had not become worthy because an Alpha King chose her. She had been worthy with $43 in her pocket, when she knelt beside Emma, and when she surrendered her home rather than her dignity. Caleb had simply recognized what everyone else had failed to see. Hannah picked up her suitcase with her free hand. Caleb glanced toward the vehicle. So where are we going? Hannah looked toward the road. I'll tell the driver. Caleb smiled. Still holding his hand because she wanted to, Hannah walked through the gates. The Moonstone's silver light faded with the dawn, but Hannah did not become Luna that morning. She packed one suitcase and kept her $43 in the inside pocket of her coat. Caleb never asked why. He understood that those folded bills represented something no royal treasury could replace. The moment she had been willing to begin with almost nothing rather than remain somewhere that diminished her. Before leaving, Caleb turned to Alpha Richard. The investigation continues. Richard bowed his head. Yes, Your Majesty. Housing and employment restrictions will be reviewed under royal supervision. No Omega who gives testimony will lose a home, wages, or work because they spoke honestly. His gaze moved toward Emma. And retaliation will be treated as defiance of royal law. For the first time that night, the Omegas near the service tables did not lower their eyes. Hannah squeezed Caleb's hand, then released it before entering the vehicle on her own. Where to? The driver asked. Caleb waited. Hannah looked through the window at the northern road. The mountains. Caleb raised an eyebrow. The palace is east. You said. Anywhere. A smile touched his face. I did. He climbed in beside her. They drove north. Hannah asked about the bond, royal law, Caleb's childhood, why his wolf had recognized her, and whether kings were always so irritatingly patient. He answered everything he could. What he did not do was ask her to promise forever. Weeks became months. Hannah refused a royal wardrobe twice and a Luna ceremony 3 times. Instead, she accepted a temporary position assisting Caleb's counsel with the Silver Pine reforms because she knew exactly where supposedly minor rules hurt the people with the least power. Caleb disagreed with her often. Hannah learned that beneath his restraint he could be stubborn, overly protective, and convinced that sleeping 4 hours a night qualified as adequate rest. Caleb learned that Hannah's gentleness was not compliance, and that once she believed something was unjust, even an Alpha King could not intimidate her into silence. Their bond grew not because the moon demanded it, but because ordinary days gave them reasons to choose each other. Silver Pine changed slowly. Wage restrictions were abolished. Housing appeals could no longer be decided by rank alone. Emma became one of the first Omegas appointed to the new community council. Mason eventually apologized again, this time without asking Hannah for anything in return. She accepted the apology but did not return to the life she had outgrown. 1 year after the night of her rejection, Hannah came back to the Moonstone courtyard. Silver lanterns hung from the same branches. The stone table stood in the same place. But Hannah wore no borrowed family crest. She carried no proof of wealth. She needed none. Caleb waited beside the Moonstone in a dark ceremonial coat. The pack expected a royal Luna ceremony. Hannah had finally agreed, but only after spending a year building a life that belonged to her before attaching any title to it. Elder Warren raised the ceremonial flame. Caleb stopped him. Then, before nobles, Omegas, servants, and children alike, the Alpha King extended his hand exactly as he had 1 year earlier. Still your choice. Hannah looked at the man the North feared and saw the one who had first earned her trust by refusing to use his power against her. She remembered the dead blue flame, Mason's rejection, her tiny cottage, Emma's trembling hands, and $43 that had once represented her entire future. She smiled. It always will be. Hannah placed her hand in Caleb's. The moonstone glowed softly, not with the violent brilliance of revelation, but with the warmth of recognition. This time nobody gasped. Nobody needed proof. Caleb bent his forehead gently to hers. Hannah closed her eyes. She had once believed destiny meant being chosen by someone powerful enough to change her life. She understood it differently now. The moon could reveal a bond. A crown could offer protection. Fate could open a door. But none of those things determined a person's worth, and none could create love without freedom. Hannah had walked through Silver Pine's gates as a rejected Omega with $43 and nowhere to go. She returned as the same woman in the only way that mattered. Still kind, still stubborn, still unwilling to become smaller for anyone. The difference was that now the kingdom knew what poverty had never erased. And beside her stood a king who had understood the truth before asking for her heart. True strength was never the power to make someone stay. It was having the power to hold them, and choosing instead to open your hand.